Hello and welcome to the Buckets and Tea NBA show. I'm your host, Cathryn Naiker. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode. Today, joining me, a Raptors Republic regular. He also writes for The Guardian, Toronto Star, Sportsnet, Yahoo Sports, and more. It's Oren Weisfeld. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. Just another week at the old job, as they call it.
The old desk at
But
home.
the old desk at home. I actually never work from here other than to do podcasts and such. I work from my couch primarily. Today I went to the cafe, did some work there. But yeah, I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. Sometimes it's good to get out. I sometimes write at a
Yeah.
cafe. But then I bought myself like a proper espresso machine, and then it's like I can have really good coffee at home. That changes things. And then sometimes I
Yeah.
do write on the couch right behind me.
Yeah. No, it
Yeah.
looks like a good writing couch, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah,
What's
yeah.
the couch for?
I'm debating putting a wallpaper on this wall behind me, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Instead of all the
Instead of all
collage you have going?
Yeah.
Wow.
Or do both. Have
Wow.
wallpaper
Get
and then
really
have
wacky. Get
and
some
then
cats while
have
you're at it. No.
and then have some of the pictures on top of the wallpaper.
That would be wacky, but might
Yeah,
look
I
cool.
know. Yeah, I
I
know.
don't have that creative of a mind. I'm a very simple man.
That's how my brain works.
Well,
Okay, we got to talk about this thumb situation that you
speaking of
have.
how your brain works, yeah, my brain doesn't work too good. Yeah.
Or it is here showing up to the podcast despite an OG Anunoby style injury. We appreciate
Right.
you.
Two, actually. I have two OGs Ananobi style injuries. I'm banged up this week, but I'm playing hurt. I'm playing hurt today. As I told you before, I dropped a space heater on my toe, and so I have a toe injury, and I cut myself, but I don't have bandages, so I got like a contraption here
A contraption.
of sorts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we appreciate it. Keep an
Yeah.
eye on it. Make sure it's actually
Mhm.
working.
Yeah, just gotta play hard for the team. Doesn't matter if you're hurt. Just gotta go out there anyways and show up for
Yeah.
the guys,
I think if like you lost your contacts, that would be like the ultimate OG Anunoby experience.
Right. But I don't have any seeing issues.
Yeah, which is
I have a
okay.
lot
So
of
you don't
other issues. Yeah. But
you're just gonna leave us hanging?
yeah. Yeah. We don't need to get into. You're not my therapist.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not. But post therapy, Cathryn is like a really good hang, I have to say. I feel like I'm a bit different. Like if I hang out with
Oh,
friends
same.
immediately after therapy, it's like we're
For
really
sure.
locked in.
Yeah. I agree with that. Me too.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's start with talking about the in-season tournament. It's officially starting on December 4th, which is coming up. And we have our matchups locked in. We have on Monday the Celtics at Pacers, and then we have the Pelicans at Kings. On Tuesday, we have Knicks at Bucks, and then Suns at Lakers. Is this like, how do you feel about the in-season tournament? Is this how you more or less saw things shaping up? What have you been surprised by? Give us the lowdown.
Yeah. I was hesitant to kind of embrace it at first. Just because like I'm gonna watch the regular season anyways and enjoy it, and I felt like there was a level of unnecessary like showmanship to this that maybe was gonna distract from the games. It's worked out really well. I think in terms of the actual games, they've been really good. But I definitely have some complaints. Like I think the whole point differential tiebreak just became way too convoluted on the last day to a point where like didn't enjoy it, to be honest. And I think they need to find a better way to do the tiebreak. If that means, making fewer groups and then just having one winner in each group, like 6 groups say, and then each winner moves on and 2 of those teams gets a bye. Something like that where it's just like head to head is the tiebreaker rather than point differential. I really didn't like it because A, it was convoluted, and B, we saw stuff with like Hack a Drummond, and like I
Right.
honestly side with the players who complained. Like not There's definitely levels to it, like the Siakam shot against Chicago with DeRozan getting mad, like, I didn't really understand that one, but on the last day, it went too far, I think, in a lot of the games where it's just like, this isn't the way the game is meant to be played, like, once you're winning, you're winning. That's just kinda how it's always been in the NBA. I don't love the idea of, like, it's just a big change to do point differential.
Mhm.
And maybe guys will get used to it, but personally, I think they should find a different way to do the tiebreaker. But otherwise, yeah, I think the in-season tournament has worked out really well. I think the other thing I complain about is that it ends too soon for some teams. Like you only play 4 games, and after 1, you could legit be like out of it
Yeah,
for all intents
yeah.
and purposes. And then you're just playing on this cool court for no reason. So maybe like more games, so that teams aren't eliminated as quickly. But it's the first year, and I'm sure they're gonna make adjustments.
Yeah, I agree. I also think too, just like the timing of it being in November, then ending early December, I feel like it's going to have this like lull from like December into like, post All-Star break.
Mhm.
And I feel like what's going to keep that part of the season exciting, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the NBA's bet is like that once we get past a certain point, people are just interested anyways. But I get what you're saying. Like, there's gonna be a little bit of a new boringness to it because there's no more in-season tournament, and we kinda got used to the in-season tournament every week.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from like a news cycle perspective, maybe like the trade deadline will replace a lot of those
Yeah, but that's,
conversations.
like, February. That's a
Yeah.
long.
It's a
Yeah.
long ways away, I agree. Pacers and
Yeah.
Celtics, I feel like, we all sort of expected the Celtics to be here. I feel like the Pacers are a little bit of a surprise. I mean, just based on kind of
Mhm.
like this random, like sample sized games, but I feel like that's really exciting for them.
Yeah, I think it's good that there are some surprises. Like, if it was only chalk the whole way through and the best teams just moved on, honestly, I wouldn't be nearly as interested. Like, the
Mhm.
Pacers are the real surprise from the East, and in the West, we have the Pelicans. I think that's a big surprise, and the Kings. I hope one of those teams makes a real run here because, yeah, and like obviously Lakers Celtics would be cool in the final, but I almost feel like if one of these young up and coming teams won it or got to the final, it would be even more exciting. Um, just as a way of like introducing casual fans to these new teams. Like everyone knows Jason Tatum and LeBron James.
Mhm.
De'Aaron Fox is like a guy, Tyrese Halliburton, like these are guys who like maybe casual fans don't know that well, and I think it could be a really good platform to
Th-
show these guys.
that's such a fun like finale too, especially because of the big trade that they had.
Oh, that would be amazing,
Right?
yeah.
Like, that
I didn't
adds
even
to
mean.
that
Yeah,
storyline. I would
that would be sick.
absolutely love that.
Yeah,
Because people have talked about that being, like, one of the most successful trades for, like, both
yeah.
teams.
I hope the
Um
script writers are listening to this because okay, that's a
Yeah,
golden
I mean,
idea.
listen, if NBA script writers are real, please hire me. I'm a really good writer,
Yeah.
and I love the NBA. But yeah, I agree. I think having the younger, the more up and coming teams, because it really feels like, there's a new generation here at this point in the NBA. And I feel like, yeah, I agree. It'd be great to see them have this platform. And that's ultimately going to be really good for the league. I would love to see them advance. I do think the Celtics are somewhat poised to win this thing. Um, I would consider them the heavy favorites, but it would be really, really exciting to see some sort of a spoiler.
Yeah, and we also might get Celtics Bucks in the second round, which would be really
Mhm.
cool because that was kinda everyone's expectation of the best 2 teams in the East coming into the season, and I think it would be a really good, like, playoff preview where we'd actually see, like, playoff rotations,
Mhm.
playoff minutes, and, it would be, like, good film to see to preview an eventual 7-game series between the 2 teams. But yeah, I'll be rooting on Boston's downfall as usual, but we'll see. I hope you're wrong.
Thank you. You know what? I hope
Yeah.
as a Raptors fan, I hope I'm wrong too. I'm not rooting for Celtics success,
Yeah.
and I'm not betting on it. I'm not a bettor.
No,
not
nor am I.
not a live gambler per se. Doing fantasy though for the first time this year. I went from dead last in my league to 10th. Not
Oh,
bad.
nice.
12th to
Okay.
10th. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this is kind of like a funny thing that happened, but I think it kind of speaks to something possibly a bit larger. And that is so Luka Doncic was called for a flopping violation that happened on Tuesday against the Rockets. And then the league decided to fine him after the fact for $2,000 for a play that happened earlier in the first quarter where he shot a three over Dylan Brooks while falling down. What appeared to be no contact. Anyways, he ended up showing up to practice dressed as a referee and then posted those pictures just as he got the fine. Now, to make it clear, he's not dressed as a NBA ref. He's dressed as like a Foot Locker, like black and white stripes type shirt. I've seen better costumes,
Mhm.
but it's like he's clearly mocking the refs, and I just feel like tell me if I'm wrong. You're allowed to, always allowed to disagree, but I feel like between like last week we talked a lot about like Chris Paul saying that like he feels like it's personal between him and Scott Foster. Like it just feels like there is this growing animosity towards the refs that we are seeing players like outwardly express in a way I don't feel like we've quite seen before.
Yeah, I think, it started last season, even at least me paying attention to it with the Fred VanVleet rant, right? Where he went at
Mm,
Ben Taylor about how some refs just kinda take over the game and make it about them and won't listen to your side of things
mhm,
and stuff like that. So I think definitely in the last couple of years, it's gotten worse. I don't know how to say if there's more tension between individual players and refs, but I do think like the the refs are not doing a good job. I'll just say that. Like Mo Dakhil had a good rant about this. If people listen to the Athletic NBA show, the Nerder She Wrote episode recently, like it's just getting so hard to play defense, and refs are just giving up way too many of these like touch fouls or guys with unnatural shooting motions just trying to like bait fouls. And I think I've seen a lot of games this year where the refs are just over calling things and doing a pretty bad job of like managing the game because it's just getting out of hand to the point where there's like 50 foul calls, 50 free throws in a game. Nobody wants to watch that. So like as an NBA, there has to be some change, I think, in how the rules are interpreted. But it is also on some of the players to take some responsibility. Like Luca is a guy who does like bait contact all the time and like exaggerates a touch foul all the time. So that's part of the reason it's so hard for these refs to call it. But to me, just something has to change because I enjoy watching like international basketball so much because you don't see these touch fouls, and it doesn't
mhm.
hurt the flow of the game as much as it does in the NBA. I remember like the other day the Lakers played the Sixers, and I literally like saw it on the box score, and I was like, I don't really want to watch this game because these are two slow plotting teams to get to the free throw line constantly. And this is what the game is going to be. And it's just like some teams, it's so bad to watch. So I don't know about like animosity between ref and player, but definitely as a fan, I don't like it.
Interesting. I mean, I feel like you're right in that it's hard to measure exactly like has animosity grown, because I also think like we're also in an era where like there's more content, there's more, there's more player interviews, there's more avenues for people to express themselves. In
Yeah.
the past, like maybe this animosity was the same, but people just didn't have as many outlets to show it.
Yeah.
So, that could very well be true, but it just feels like it's growing. And I think like your frustrations as a fan are, as an observer of basketball, very real. And I'm sure other people are feeling that as well. Yeah, I personally, as somebody who's watched basketball for a very long time, I feel like it's growing. It could just
Mhm.
be me, but I definitely feel like it's growing, and it's definitely something to watch out for because if players keep speaking up about the refs and they just keep getting fined left and right, like, I'm starting to hear more and more people wanting the refs to be held accountable. I feel like that wasn't a conversation that
Mhm.
wasn't had to the same level in the past. Like, will these refs get fined for really bad calls? And I mean, they don't make the same amount of money, so I think that would have to be adjusted somewhat. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's definitely interesting to me. I feel like it is growing, and yeah, it's bizarre in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Dressing up as a ref, I feel like I've never been someone to subscribe to being like, "I'm so petty." You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so
Like,
you
"Look at
didn't
me, I'm
like
so
it. You didn't
petty and I'm
like it.
so funny." I've never been that person. I never really subscribed to that. I don't know, I feel like that was, like, a phase on the internet that was bigger maybe, like, a year or 2 ago, but, yeah, I've never been that person, but I guess Luka is, which is
Yeah,
fine.
I don't know. I haven't either, but, yeah, it's a tricky situation because definitely it's harder than ever to ref because the game is played at such a fast pace now, and guys have so many tricks to bait fouls. But the animosity probably just comes from a place of, like, guys feeling like the game's not ref very well, and I don't know what the solution is. That's kind of the issue.
Mhm,
Other than a different interpretation of the rules, and if that happens, guys will not expect to get a foul call for, like, tiki-taka contact. That's
mhm.
that's my solution to it.
Yeah, and the timing of it too, because it's like it's not just the ticky-tack fouls, but it's also, like, the inconsistency
Mhm.
of those
Like
calls.
like that Pacers-Raptors game where OG got called for a foul on the Tyrese Halliburton drive, and they challenged it. Um, like, that was a ridiculous call. Like, yeah, he had his hand on his hip, but that was, like, minimal contact with 30 seconds left in a close game to call that, um, I just don't think is, like, the right interpretation of the rules.
Mhm, mhm. I agree with you. I totally
Yeah.
respect that. Another thing that's come up in the NBA is that Mark Cuban is selling his ownership stake of the Dallas Mavericks out of an evaluation of $3.5 billion. He is going to remain a part of the team in terms of like being a voice for basketball operations. There is what has been referred to as a casino family, the Adelson family, uh, who are looking to buy his stake, and it's to me it's interesting. So apparently they're going to sell their shares in Las Vegas Sands Corp in order to buy the share of the Mavericks. I think
Las Vegas Sands Corp sounds like a James Bond villain's, like
it doesn't sound like a real corporation.
yeah, yeah,
I agree. It sounds like something out of yeah, like out of James Bond or Ocean's 11 or something.
yeah.
But that's what it's called, and they're selling their shares in that so they can buy this majority stake of the Mavericks. I mean, I guess like in a way it wouldn't be a conflict of interest if they are no longer a part of the gambling community, but I personally think it's interesting for someone with such close ties to gambling to become part of the ownership group for a team. I maybe it's nothing, but to
Mhm.
me, I feel like that's got to be something because there's only so many billionaires in the world. They all know each other, I assume. And like to me, like the Mark Cuban thing is, it's interesting, but it's also like it's a billionaire having more billions of dollars. Good for you, I guess.
Yeah, I think, there was also reporting that him and that family were already before this, like, in talks to build, like, a big casino arena situation together, um,
Mm,
before this, and I was saying to you, like, sports betting is illegal in Texas, but that might change. So, there's all these weird things going on, but I don't really honestly know what to say about it until there's more information. Um, it seems weird for sure at first glance that Mark Cuban is getting this money, but yet he's getting to stay on as the head of basketball operations. Like, that's so rarely the case where you kind of can have your cake and eat it too in a sale like this. But maybe that's real, maybe it's not. I don't know if you have anything else to say about the gambling part of it before I say something else.
No, go ahead.
I think the most interesting thing that hasn't been discussed at all, and maybe it's because this gambling sidebar is like, remember when Mark Lazary sold like a portion of the Milwaukee Bucks in the summer?
Mhm.
And everyone rushed to go like, "Oh my god, maybe he knows something about Giannis. Maybe Giannis is leaving, and that's why he's selling it to get out ahead of, what would devalue the franchise if Giannis left." Why is no one saying the same thing about Luka? Like, this is a
Ooh.
guy we've speculated about leaving for a long time already, and Mark Cuban would know better than anybody about how Luka feels long term with Dallas. So I do think it's worth speculating if that could factor into it, because if Luka leaves, like, the Dallas Mavericks will plummet in their, you know, they don't have a lot else going for them other
Mhm,
than Luka
mhm.
Doncic. So that is definitely something that came to my mind, and I think it's fair to wonder if we wondered the same thing about Milwaukee.
Yeah, well, I think, like, I don't know if in Milwaukee, like, he stayed on board in any sort of role or capacity with the team.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So I think that's a bit of a key difference, but you're right. I mean, Luca possibly leaving is definitely a big concern. There's a lot riding on this season for them. I also think too, like, kind of going back to our earlier topic, like, he has like a reputation for being like a bit of a brat.
Mhm.
Right? Especially with refs, but also in other circumstances. It happened in FIBA as well, like, he couldn't stop complaining,
Yeah,
and I wonder if, like, that's gonna be his, like, Achilles heel in a way, like, if that's gonna come back to bite him or not,
yeah.
especially, like, if they go deep into the playoffs. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, that is I don't know if that's a play in this or not. I mean, I think maybe Mark Cuban's also just been doing this for a long time, and 3.5 billion sounds like a pretty solid evaluation to me. I mean, who's turning that down? So, maybe he's just
Yeah.
moving on. He's also leaving Shark Tank.
Yeah, I know. So that makes it interesting too in terms of what are his other plans. Aiden Moss of Raptors Republic also had an interesting point on this where he thinks that Mark Cuban is getting out before the NBA bubble bursts. Like, he believes that the NBA is on shaky financial terms with viewership
Ooh.
down and, streaming. Nobody watched cable anymore, that stuff all affecting it, and he thinks that there is a sort of bubble that has been building up and that Mark Cuban thinks that is going to burst. Actually, someone else had this, what's his name? Um, Someone else said this, whatever. So that could be the case too. I've always kind of disagreed with Aiden on that point. I think the NBA is gaining in popularity, if anything. Um, and I feel like they will find ways to, like, earn revenue from the increasing popularity on social media and whatever else it might be, but it's definitely a possibility, because there's this big TV deal coming up in 2025, and maybe
Mhm.
it's not what everyone thinks it's gonna be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's gonna be the huge, telltale, right? Like, once we know the details of that deal, which way it's going. I mean, I was watching this thing with Stephen A. Smith, but he was talking about this very thing in terms of, like, at ESPN, how, like, the NFL is number 1, but the NBA is next, and that they have and continue to figure out ways to generate revenue from a combination of, cable, but also streaming. And they're figuring out more and more how to utilize like social media for profits and things of that nature. So he felt
Mhm.
like things would balance out. Um so that's just a little tidbit there from a
Yeah, that's kinda what I
executive
think.
producer of sorts.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, but, I don't know how economics works either, so I'm not gonna pretend to. Like, I can barely do my
This is
taxes.
not an economics podcast,
Yeah,
absolutely.
like, who knows?
Yeah. With that, let's move on to our Raptors Homer moment. So, this team has been very hot and cold. We're recording this on Thursday after our very nice win against the Phoenix Suns. But that, follows a disappointing loss to the Nets and so on and so forth. I feel like fans are kind of on different ends of the spectrum in terms of being like optimistic or frustrated with the team or a bit of both. I sent you an article. I'm just trying to pull it up here. I have too many things, too many tabs open. Um about basically this is an opinion piece about the Raptors, realizing that it's difficult to win playing this bench. They kind of compare it to Nick Nurse last year, how Nick Nurse had to play the starters so much to the point where they burnt out towards the end of the season in order to be competitive. um it kind of comes to this idea of like, some people feel like this might be a wasted season. I don't personally feel that way at all. Um, but like, for example, like Will Liu during I believe this was the Nets game. He
Who?
wrote
Yeah, I was
Will
joking.
Liu.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, he said, not gonna lie, this looks a lot like last year's team and how little they're playing together. If this is how it goes, what's even the point? But then we have these flashes where they play together really, really well. What do you make of this?
It's honestly really hard to read, in terms of that up and down play. Like, young teams are inconsistent, so I think there's some of that going on. It's natural to show up one night and not show up the other night. But we need to stop as a Raptors community taking every game as an indictment on the season and the franchise, because I just think we need to be patient and give Darko specifically some time here. Like, I was really frustrated during that loss to the Brooklyn Nets. Like Will said, like, there was no ball movement, no playing together, that stuff. But then the next night against Phoenix, you see phenomenal ball movement, quick decisions all over the place, tons of passing. Um, so, I think we just need to give it a little bit more time before we can definitively say, like, is this like last year or is it different enough? In terms of the minutes thing, like, I will push back on that for sure. I don't think this is Nick Nurse at all. Um, the highest minutes per game guy is Scotty at 34. That's lower than a lot of other teams' top guy. And you look down the list, there's 11 players playing at least 12 minutes a game
I think
when they play.
their point was like that's what Nick Nurse had to do to win, and kind of implying that that's what this team would have to do in order to win, which I
Yeah,
don't
I would
agree
push back on that though, because look, like, you wanted to ask me about Darko too. This team is a 500 team. Last year's team was a 500 team, but they are going about it in different ways. And that's the primary example. Like, this team is playing their bench a lot more, and they're not kind of gaming out these wins by just riding Fred and Pascal 40 minutes
with.
a game. Like,
Mhm, mhm.
they're winning based on, not necessarily, like, based on everyone contributing, but everyone is playing and they're winning the same amount of games. So in that sense, I think it's different. But yeah, I don't know if you want to get into Darko, but I think,
Sure.
like, I like him. Like, I I just think anytime you get a new coach, you got to give it some time. You can't judge it after like 18 games or whatever. I don't think it's fair, but I like him because there's a real focus, obviously, on like relationship building, and I thought that's what they had to go get when they fired Nick, in terms
Mhm.
of a coach who's going to relate to the younger generation and who's going to make a point to build relationships and therefore get buy-in from these guys and, trust these guys to make mistakes. And Malachi Flynn is obviously the best example of a guy who has been trusted, and now he's actually playing by far the best basketball of his career. So I like that. And then B, like the offense, I think is dramatically different from last year, even if the results haven't been as good or good. Um, last year again, they gamed out wins by riding Fred and Pascal two-man actions or whatever it might be. This year, I just feel like there's a lot more variety in the offense, and it doesn't always result in points, but there is a lot more versatility in the types of actions that they're doing, the different looks that guys are getting, like more guys just getting more shots, more guys playing, and I think that is going to pay dividends down the road. Um, so I like the offensive process a lot. Some games it doesn't look good at all, and for whatever reasons they kind of fall back in their old ways, like against Brooklyn. But you kind of expect that. Like this is a coach that's had them for like 18 games. Like I don't think we are going to expect every night they're going to drill like all of his philosophies to a T.
Hmm.
Um, but to me, it feels different enough. The roster is not doesn't make sense still, but all these things that I talked about, they'll still pay dividends down the road when you do kind of even out the roster and it makes a little bit more sense. I think all these philosophies are going to carry over.
Right. I mean, I completely agree with you when it comes to Darko. Like, I feel like we absolutely needed relationship building on this team. I feel like he does deserve more time with this team. Absolutely. The only thing that I would maybe like push back on a little bit is the idea that this is like a quote unquote young team because they like are and they're not. You know what I mean? Because you have Dennis Schroeder, you have Pascal Siakam, you have OG Anunoby, like you have these like,
Yeah.
vets
Hmm.
on the team with a lot of experience. And I feel like one thing, tell me if you disagree, I feel like is a bit lacking is that like who's the vocal leader on this team?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I feel like obviously like Scotty's gonna become like our number one, and there's this sort of like 1A, 1B situation between him and Pascal right now, but I don't feel like either of them are like strong vocal leaders. And I
Yeah.
feel like this team is missing that.
I think it's a good point. I think to answer the question, Dennis Schroeder is probably their most vocal leader. He likes to talk. But I was reading something recently. I hope I'll remember what it was. But I think it was about Steve Nash. And it was saying like it helps so much when your best player is also your vocal leader. So
Right.
yeah, like until Scotty is that guy, I don't think they're gonna reach their full potential, but
Mhm.
he's not gonna be that guy. He's 22. He's a kid. Like we see the quotes, like he's a kid still. So he's gonna have to do a little bit of growing up before he becomes that guy, if he ever does. But I don't think it's necessarily like a huge problem on this team, um, yet. But yeah, it's maybe too early to say still.
Yeah. That's fair. Um the Raptors are continuously in trade rumors. It's constant. I feel like as a Raptors fan, it's pretty frustrating uh to every week. It feels like there's a new Raptor in trades talks. The latest is that the Atlanta Hawks are interested. I feel like the Hawks are kind of interesting because they're also a team that's sort of like stuck in the middle and not sure which direction they're going to go in. Obviously, I think they have a bit of more of a win now pressure with Trey Young there. But there was rumors that there were talks between of a trade between Pascal Siakam and DeJounte Murray, although DeJounte Murray then signed an extension and he can't be traded until at least January 6th. Do you think this team is going to make a move? Do you find these rumors frustrating? Where are you at?
I definitely find it frustrating when people see like these rumors about like the Raptors are worried that OG Anunoby is going to sign a short-term deal for more money than whatever. And it's like if it's something like that, where you're saying the Raptors are worried, that insinuates that you have inside information from the Raptors, and
Mhm.
I just don't buy that. If you're telling me
Mhm.
you have inside information from the Hawks that they're interested in Siakam, sure, like, the Hawks might talk. We know the Raptors don't really talk, so those rumors definitely frustrate me. It frustrates me when fans prematurely kill the team for, like, losing Pascal or OG for nothing in free agency before it happens, because we lost Fred, and so people kinda just assume that we're gonna lose another one of these guys. Like, if that happens, that's horrible, and we can criticize them then,
Well,
but
we
let's
lost
wait.
more than just Fred, in fairness to them, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, sure. But in terms of, like, do I think they'll make a move? Yeah, I think, a lot can change in between now and February, like, good or bad. This team could start playing really well with Siakam, and they could start winning a lot of games, and that can make their decision a lot easier to keep him, but I think more likely they hover around 500, realize that their window for winning isn't the next couple years, and yeah, a Siakam trade would not surprise me at all.
Right. I feel like one thing that makes it so frustrating is like because they've been happening for so long that I think like there's, one side of the fan base that's like, just do it already.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of the blow it up narrative is this just like, just do it already thing. And then there's like another side of the fandom that's like, well, of course they want Siakam. Like every team in the league wants what we have because who we have are so great. Right, and, like, of course, they're, worthy assets and things like that, and, like, stop trying to trade our guys away all the time. I think, like, just the chatter around it is frustrating, but again, like, it just feels like every week it happens. Like, I remember, like, last year, like, leading up to that trade deadline, it felt almost certain that the Raptors were gonna make huge moves, and then it just ended up being, like, Jakob Poeltl and a draft pick.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, you can't read the front office very well, but I think this year is different than last year because OG and Siakam just have a different level of trade value than Fred did,
Mhm.
quite simply, and they're both free agents. So they actually have to pick a direction now. Like, either you pay both of those guys and you put a lot of money into the short-term future of this team and basically say, like, we're trying to win now, or you trade one of those guys and hint at, no, like, we are slow playing this and we're okay to do that. And I think that's more likely, but I'm definitely not pretending to know what this front office is doing.
Mhm. Yeah, and then also Gary Trent Jr. is in that mix as well, and
Yeah.
yeah, things are definitely gonna be in
He
Go ahead.
he sorry, he falls, like, more into the Fred camp, though, I think, where if they lose him for nothing, it's not gonna be, like, the end of the world because his trade value probably isn't that great right now. So, I'm less concerned about what happens with him than the other guys.
Yeah, that's more than fair. He has definitely struggled this season, although he has flashes of, like, the old Gary.
Yeah,
So
last couple games, he's been good.
yeah, so hoping he picks it up. Okay, let's move on to our hottie highlight of the week. And I'm giving this to Grady Dick for reasons not related to any puns. Believe it or not. I'm giving this to Grady Dick because he moved to the 905 and he actually opened up about his struggles in the beginning of his NBA career. He said, quote, "It's been a whirlwind. There's a lot going on. But at the same time, I go back to taking advice from my family and the people in my corner of just keeping my head down, my head on my shoulders, and not letting the business get to me." He goes on to say, "You get stuck on social media, and that's probably the worst thing you can do. You've got to stay with your team, your coaches, fan base, and your family because because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. His G League debut did not go well. He was 1 of 12 for shooting. We went 1 for 12 and 0 for 6 from three. His second game, he scored 22 points, but it was on 5 of 21 and 3 of 12. So he scored more, but it was inefficient shooting. He did hit all of his free throws, which were a total of 7. I personally am giving him the hottie highlight of the week because I really appreciate him opening up about it. I always
Mhm.
appreciate people who are just kind of honest and frank in that way. Like, look, it's been hard, leaning on my family, staying off of social media. That's absolutely the thing to do. I think we're all rooting for him to like find his shot and things like that. But I just really, really appreciate how candid he's been. I feel like you rarely see that from a rookie or from players in general.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. If anything, like, the longer guys are in the league, the less likely they are to open up in some ways, so but at the same time, you don't see it from a rookie often, so, yeah, it's nice to hear him say that. It's hard for sure for these rookies because they're getting compared to all these other guys in their draft class who might have went behind them, and you see Raptors fans going like, "Oh, why didn't we take this guy? Oh, why?" And it's like 20 games into a 19-year-old season. It's completely unfair, but it happens constantly, and he sees it, of course. So, um, it must be really hard to struggle and to see your name constantly criticized and compared to guys who are playing well. But at the same time, like, as Raptors fans, we definitely need to remember that judging a 19-year-old off of his first 10 games in the NBA is just a silly exercise.
Hmm.
And I also think the G League is like Grady is not he's not one of these ball dominant guys, so he's always going to look better besides better players. Right? He's a guy who accentuates, he's a play finisher. He accentuates guys. He's not a setup guy or a guy who's gonna necessarily, like, raise your floor a ton. So, I think in that way, it's a little bit hard for him in the G League playing with also, they have all these injuries, like, playing with a bunch of guys who aren't necessarily finding him in his spots. So, I think, like, it's fine to play him there to get him as many reps as possible and for him to, like, fight through the struggles. But it would also be unfair to expect him to go there and kill it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about Grady. I don't know about you.
I'm not worried. I mean, like we talked about Malachi Flynn earlier on this show, and he really struggled in his first, seasons, 2 seasons.
Yeah. 3.
And I feel like yes, like the coach wasn't really giving him a fair shot, arguably, and I don't disagree, but also like it takes a while to adjust to NBA life. He's also not like a top draft pick per se. Like we drafted him 13th.
Yeah. So,
So
yeah.
I mean, like, I feel like people need to manage their expectations. I think he had a lot of hype around him because of his name, because of the jacket, because of his image, that
Mhm.
maybe people just expected more from him because you usually don't see that much hype around a rookie of his stature. And
Yeah.
maybe that like messed with people's expectations a bit. Maybe it even messed with his own a little bit. But I feel like ultimately this will be good. Like I'm I feel like years past, the Raptors were obviously known for development. I feel like with the new coaching staff, we're trying to get back to that. We're trying to get back to being known for being a really good development team. And so I hope that he can thrive under a new system.
Yeah. I
What are
was
you
just
looking
looking
up,
this up.
Oren?
I'm just looking up Jamie Jaquez, the Heat player who, like, we often see Grady compared to, right?
Mhm.
And he's like, he spent like 4 years at UCLA before coming to the NBA, and he's 3 years older than Grady. So, I just think when we make these comparisons, like, yeah, Grady's not playing very well, and I think it's really easy to go like, I'm not even worried about how great he's playing, but I even will go like, "Ooh, but this guy's playing really well, and this guy's playing really well. This guy looks good." But, every situation is different, and also comparing him to, like, upperclassmen, it just doesn't really make sense. If you draft a rookie or, yeah, a rookie out of college, you kinda expect it to take some time for them to really thrive in the NBA. Scotty Barnes is obviously, like, a rare example. So, um we'll see. Only time can tell with these things. Fit wise, it seems like he would be a good fit theoretically. The start of his NBA career has definitely been discouraging, but um, I don't know. Like, let's talk at the end of the season and make some decisions about Gradey then, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. He deserves more time. Also, too, like the draft is such a crapshoot. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like you always see people trying to redraft years past, and that's because people don't always get it right. Like it's rare that one, two, three, four, five end up being like, yeah, that's how we would draft it years later. Like
Yeah.
that almost never happens.
No, exactly. And the Raptors have had misses recently, but like I wrote about this recently too, is like you draft the 2021 draft again right now, and Scotty Barnes probably goes first.
Yeah,
So we have to also acknowledge their hits if we're gonna like constantly
absolutely.
criticize the misses.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Oren, thank you so much for joining me this week. Let us know what you're up to and where people can find you on the internets.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always fun to talk. I'm just nursing these injuries. No.
Yeah, how's your
Um
finger? Did it hold up? Like,
yeah,
has
it held. It
your
held.
makeshift Band-Aid was successful? The listeners wanna know.
For now it's okay, but I don't know what I can't leave the
I
house
think you
like
should
this,
I
so
think you should leave the house like that, and you should walk to your nearest drugstore and buy
I
yourself some
have
Band-Aids.
yeah, I have a limp too, so just, like, walking down the house with
Okay,
this and a
like,
limp.
listen, you can Uber Eats it now, you know what I mean? Like,
I can
you got
Uber Eats bandages.
I'm pretty sure you can, yeah.
I bet you can, but I just am very stubborn and would never do that,
No, I'm
unfortunately.
not suggesting you should I meant, like, if
Yeah.
you can't walk,
Oh, no, I could walk, it would just kinda look embarrassing. But,
especially with the thumb thing.
yeah, exactly. But no, I will have a piece tomorrow at sportsnet.ca about Friday, I guess, when this comes out at
Yeah.
sportsnet.ca about the Miami University women's basketball team where 4 Canadians have teamed up. So it's kind of a cool
Oh,
story there.
awesome.
Yeah, and that's really what I've been working on right now. And otherwise, you can find me at Oren Weisfeld on Twitter, and that's about it.
Amazing. Thanks again. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye.